TAM Airlines Flight 3054, Brazil's deadliest air disaster. A rainy evening, a short runway, and a tragedy that forever changed Sao Paulo. It was July 17, 2007, when TAM Airlines Flight 3054, an Airbus A320, prepared to land at Sao Paulo's Congonhas Airport after a short domestic flight from Porto Alegre. The flight carried 181 passengers and 6 crew members, people heading home, families, business travelers, and airline staff returning from duty. As the aircraft descended through heavy rain, no one could have imagined that within minutes, Brazil would witness its worst air disaster, the final approach. The weather over Sao Paulo that evening was terrible: pounding rain, low visibility, and water pooling on the runway. Congonhas Airport sits in the heart of the city, surrounded by buildings, highways, and neighborhoods. Its runways are notoriously short, with almost no margin for error. Flight 3254's crew was aware that the right engine's thrust reverser was deactivated for maintenance. That's a normal condition for an Airbus, but it meant braking would have to be perfect. At 6:54 p.m., the jet touched down on runway 35L, wet, slick, and shorter than most major airports. The flight data later showed something critical. One of the thrust levers remained in the climb position instead of idle. That mistake meant the right engine continued to produce forward power while the left engine went into reverse thrust, a deadly combination that caused the jet to speed up rather than slow down. In just seconds, the plane veered off the runway, skidded across the end barrier, and careened across a busy avenue. It struck a TAM Express warehouse and a fuel station, erupting into a fireball that consumed everything around it. There were no survivors. All 187 people on board were killed, along with 12 others on the ground. The total, 199 lives lost. The investigation and the hard truth. The investigation was led by Brazil's Aeronautical Accidents Investigation and Prevention Center. The findings painted a heartbreaking picture of human error, poor infrastructure, and weather-driven chaos. The right engine's thrust lever had not been set to idle, preventing ground spoilers and auto brakes from activating. The wet runway, lacking proper grooves for drainage, dramatically reduced braking power. Pilots had reported unsafe conditions earlier that same day. Congonhas, with its location in a dense city, gave crews no safety overrun area. Once you ran out of concrete, you hit buildings. The combination of technical error, poor runway conditions, and systemic oversight turned a normal landing into a catastrophe. The families and their fight. In the months that followed, grief turned into action. Families of the victims united to demand answers, not just from the airline, but from the government that operated the airport and approved its reopening despite unfinished safety work. Class action lawsuits were filed in Brazil and abroad. The families argued that the government and aviation regulators failed to ensure the runway met safety standards, allowing landings during rain even after pilots had reported dangerous hydroplaning. Prosecutors brought criminal charges against TAM executives and senior officials from Brazil's Civil Aviation Agency, accusing them of negligence. The legal battles lasted for years, with proceedings in both Brazilian and U.S. courts. In 2017, Airbus reached a settlement with victims' families worth roughly 30 million reais, and TAM provided compensation to hundreds of relatives. Many criminal cases ended without convictions, but the families achieved what they set out to do. They forced a national reckoning. They pushed the Brazilian government to confront how infrastructure, regulation, and accountability had failed 199 innocent people. Reforms that followed. The aftermath of Flight 3054 led to sweeping changes in Brazil's aviation system. Runway 35L was rebuilt and grooved to improve drainage and friction. Congonhas airport operations were restricted during heavy rain, and new aircraft limits were introduced. National policies were rewritten to strengthen oversight, maintenance standards, and emergency procedures. And internationally, Airbus revised its manuals and pilot training to emphasize throttle management and thrust lever checks during landings. The legacy of 3054 wasn't just one of loss, it was one of reform, born from heartbreak, the human cost. What's often forgotten amid the reports and headlines is the human story, the families who stood outside the smoldering warehouse that night, waiting for word. The doctors, teachers, children, and workers whose names are now engraved in bronze at the Memorial Plaza built on the crash site. At the memorial, a single mulberry tree survived the flames. It still stands today, surrounded by 199 engraved names, a living reminder of love, loss, and the fight for accountability, why it still matters. Flight 3054 reminds us that aviation safety isn't just about machines. It's about decisions. It's about communication between pilots and towers, maintenance teams and managers, regulators and airports. It's about never letting convenience outweigh caution. For the families, the fight never really ended. But because of their courage, runways across Brazil are safer, regulations are stronger, and every passenger boarding a flight benefits from the lessons learned that night.